Relax now, boys. Relax. It's not the biggest of cards, but the teller is here for UFC Vegas 87. We got a heavyweight matchup between Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Shamil Gaziev. Gaziev, a fighter that has really just bursted on the scene very recently, right? Had that victory on Dana White's Contender Series and still really wasn't getting that much respect. But after the last fight that he just had, that last victory that he had over Martin Buday, people are putting some respect on his name, and look at him now. He's in a main event slot here. So somewhat impressive. Again, the card not the most stacked, but there's actually some fighters that are intriguing throughout the card. Some young and promising fighters. You got Mokaev on the card, Umar Nurmagomedov, and you got some top-notch young talent. Javid, Basharat, another fighter that people really hold in high regard. Leroy, Duncan too. So you guys know what we're going to be doing here. We're going to jump into the first fight here in a second. We got timestamps so you guys can slide anywhere you want throughout this video. If you guys please can like this video though. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. It means so much to me, guys. If you guys can do that, I've been really grinding over here. We're coming off another profitable event. You guys can go check out the recap here on the channel of UFC Mexico. And I hope you guys like these little videos that I've been working on, the shorts over here on YouTube. They're on Instagram as well. And please follow me on Instagram and Twitter. It's scrolling below. If you guys can do that for me, it'd mean a lot to me. And like I said, we are hitting these plays, man, stringing off profitable events. So do not hesitate to reach out to me if you are interested in working with me for my official plays. All right, guys, let's jump into the first fight.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
Kicking the card off in the middleweight division, we have CLD, Leroy Duncan, taking on Claudio Ribeiro. Claudio Ribeiro coming off Dana White's Contender Series. He had that big knockout on the show. He has heavy hands, and he will look to decapitate you in there. But besides that, I will say that he is not the most refined striker and not the most refined fighter overall. He's very raw. So again, he had that knockout over Ivan Venezuela, but then he got knocked out in his UFC debut against Abdul-Razak Al-Hassan, who is a knockout artist, but really starting to show that he has some striking defensive flaws. Bounced back with a knockout victory over Joseph Holmes, a very low-level fighter, not a UFC caliber in my opinion, and then he gets knocked out by Roman Kopylov after that. So getting knocked out twice in his last three fights. Now, I want you to note that he would have not made the over in both of those fights. So really in all three of his fights, I do believe there, right? He's been going, all three of his last fights have gone the under of those 3 rounds. I want you just to note that. We'll circle back to that in a second. But I want to be clear, the route that I'm going with my decision for this fight is I'm on the CLD side. I think that CLD is a much more smooth striker. He's much more technically sound defensively. I think he can avoid that big shot from Ribeiro, and I think he can capitalize and land some big shots in this fight. CLD has been a fight finisher throughout his career. If you're not really up to date with him, I know he's kind of new to the UFC, but he's a guy that's been fighting over there across the pond. He's been handling business, getting a lot of early knockouts. I think that he can get an early knockout in this fight. I think there's potential for him to get a first-round knockout. If this fight goes to the second round, Ribeiro seems just to always get finished right before the halfway mark. So let's go take a look at the betting line here. You can get the under 1.5, right around minus 125 right now. I like the under. I'm more on the underside here from a money line perspective on the fight. Leroy Duncan is a minus 280 right now, opened up as a minus 240. Action's coming in on him. This line's getting a little high. If you caught it early at minus 240 or better, obviously you're in a better situation there. That's a line that I like more. As it gets into the minus 300s, I think that it's a little high for my liking. But I want to be clear. I think Leroy Duncan is the side to be on. I think he gets the job done here. For some of you guys that just have to have action on these types of fights, I mean, throw it in a two-team parlay. Leroy Duncan did take a recent loss, but that was against Arman Petrosian, who is a very talented striker, and that fight just happened to play out like that. CLD is a striking first fighter. I expect this fight to be a striking fight as well. So the difference is Arman Petrosian is a very polished striker, okay? He's a very underrated striker, or maybe people understand how good he is. He's a one-dimensional fighter. That's why people don't put too much respect on his name at times, but CLD bounces back with that knockout victory over Dennis Teolinen. And I like CLD to get the finish here. And I think that he starts to get his career on track a little bit. This is a fighter that's fought up in the light heavyweight division, I believe, as well, over in Cage Warriors. And I like him in the middleweight division. He has a nice frame for the division. Give me CLD to get that earlier knockout. In the lightweight division, we have Loik Radzhabov taking on Abdul-Kareem Al-Selwady. Now, Loik is coming off a brutal knockout loss against Mateusz Rebecki, who we know, and I think some of us have known for a while, is an absolute stud. All right, so no real shame in the loss as far as the level of opponent, but also note that he got knocked out, and he's going to be coming into this fight with possibly a lack of confidence. All right, this happens to some of these fighters that are coming off brutal finishes like that, especially a guy that's creeping up to 35 years old. I mean, he's almost to his mid 30s right now, and in the lightweight division, that's a division that does matter a little bit more so. No, and in his UFC debut, he had that decision victory over Esteban Ribovics. Now, that was a fight where he was heavily relying on his grappling, and he did take that fight on short notice. He was breathing heavily, but it really wasn't the best look for him. I mean, we do know that Ribovics is a good fighter, but still, it wasn't the best look for him. Loik, I break down more and more tape on him from his PFL days, and he's a fighter that can grapple. He's very physically strong, and that may be an avenue that he has in this fight to potentially get the job done. But his striking, it's very... he throws a lot of single shots. I don't like it. He doesn't throw any type of combinations. He's very clunky. He's very muscular. He has heavy leg kicks, and he has a heavy overhand. So like if he does find Abdul's chin, it could be a problem. Abdul is a fighter that we've seen knocked out 3 times. This is definitely something we got to talk about here. In his 3 losses, he's been knocked out in every single one of them. And I think with the power that Loik has, even though the speed and technique is not really the best, if he does touch Abdul, he can get a knockout here. But all in all, I don't like how Loik sets up his striking. I think that Abdul can potentially avoid that big shot, and I expect Abdul to be the more active fighter. You saw his fight on Dana White's Contender Series. He looked very good. He was the underdog in that fight, and he went out there, was extremely active. The former Fury champion as well. He was very active in that victory that he had over a very respectable fighter. At least people were kind of high on George Hardwick. I believe the former Cage Warriors champion, or was the Cage Warriors champion at the time. I don't know if he still is, but George Hardwick was a fighter people were kind of high on, and Abdul went out there, handled business, cracked him with some big shots early. There's constant movement. All right, he's moving around. He's a well-rounded fighter, and I think he can get the better of the volume in this fight. And I'm not positive that Loik can just hold him down and use his grappling to take this fight here. So I like the younger fighter, the 28-year-old Abdul, to get the job done. I am aiming more towards the decision route. I think that Abdul just kind of outworks him. Let's take a look at the betting line here. Now, I will say this much. As far as the money line goes, I think there's more value on a plus 130 Loik Radzhabov money line. I would say, because this is a fight I have capped a little bit closer. I'm not crazy about targeting Abdul right around minus 165, minus 160. I need to see more from him. Loik has battled against respectable talent, has a victory over Chris Wade, I believe, and he's fought real deal fighters over in the PFL. He has a fight where he lost this fight, but he's gone in there and fought with guys. Like Rush Manfio. It's a fighter I have respect for. Alex Martinez isn't a bad fighter. A loss and a victory, one of each there. Like I said, been in there with guys like Chris Wade, Rashid Magomedov. I met Magomedov back in the day at the mall. He was with the whole Dagestani crew down in South Florida walking around. He was a cool dude. I saw him right after he had a fight as well, and we were kind of laughing. I told him I had some money on him, and he came through for me. But I like Abdul-Kareem Al-Selwady to be a little bit more active here. I like his mentality. He's extremely confident. And I think right now he's hitting his stride because he's just completely just consumed by the game, and he's really starting to get success, and he's feeling himself, where Loik's going to come in questioning himself a bit. And, he's getting up there in age, and he's clunky. He's muscular. So give me Abdul. I like the over here. It's at minus 160, but I do aim over. I think this fight goes to a decision. I like Abdul-Kareem Al-Selwady to win this fight via decision. We got the undefeated Javid Basharat taking on Aiemann Zahabi, the brother of Firas Zahabi. He makes an appearance in the cage every once in a while. He's 36 now. He's on a little bit of a win streak, is Zahabi. This is a good fight. Javid Basharat, coming off a very frustrating performance. It was very frustrating for me because I had him mixed up in a parlay that day, and it would have definitely cashed. He was on his way to defeating Victor Henry. He was up. He was looking great, and he accidentally hit him with the groin strike, and Victor Henry didn't want to continue there. Before that, decision victories over Mendonça, Tony Gravely, and Trevin Jones. So he really hasn't been finding his finishes in the cage as of recently like he had early on in his career. And it's worth noting that the early portion of his career has been against very low-level fighters, but he does pass the eye test. He's a very well-rounded fighter. He has good jiu-jitsu. He's very active with his striking. And, the speed is there and all that. And that's why people are high on him. And that's why you're seeing these high betting lines next to his name. He's so complete. You could trust him to really fight an intelligent fight as well. He's a very trustworthy fighter. Now, Aiemann Zahabi, he's a little slow in there at times, but very, very high. He has a very, very high IQ when he's in the cage. Obviously, having his brother working with him throughout the years, and he's just a very smart dude. He's had some big time performances as well. He's coming off a nice knockout victory, and he's had a couple of those knockouts come recently. Knocked out Draco Rodriguez as well as Kuling Ayori. Had a decision victory over Ricky Turcios, who's also fighting in this card. That was a split decision victory. Turcios is a respectable fighter, in my opinion. Now, he was knocked out against Ricardo Ramos, if you remember that. That was a brutal one there. And he lost a decision to Vince Morales, which that's the question mark on his resume, man. If it wasn't for that loss there, I think people would hold him in a lot higher regard. I don't know. Vince Morales has had some ups and downs, but I'm not very high on him. And I think that kind of made Zahabi's, the way we view him, just look not as good. He's 36 years old. Let's cut to the chase here. I think Javid Basharat will be smart enough to avoid that knockout shot from Aiemann Zahabi, and I think the activity is going to be the difference here. Javid Basharat, right now he's landing 5.65 strikes per minute in the octagon. Aiemann at 3.04. That's on the lower side of things. Javid has only been absorbing 2.5. It's a great number. Zahabi only absorbing 3.4. It's not a bad number either, but still absorbing more. The numbers really point towards Javid Basharat, and the tape points towards Javid Basharat. He is 28 years old. Aieman's 36 in the lower weight class. I mean, I got to go Javid Basharat via decision here. I'll make it simple. I think Aiemann is smart enough to avoid being finished here. He's smart enough to avoid being submitted down to the mat or anything like that. But I just don't think Zahabi finds that big shot here. If Zahabi does shake things up, I think he lands a big shot and gets a knockout, which I wouldn't be banking on. Javid Basharat opened up as a minus 425. He's now minus 650. I want nothing to do with this line here. I don't like it. I like Javid a lot, but I don't like the line. I think it's too steep. I think that the value is on Aiemann Zahabi. Just understand he's a solid fighter. The over 2.5 is at minus 220 right now. So this fight is very much favored to go to a decision. And interestingly enough, that's exactly how I feel about it. That's how you should feel about it. This is probably going to be one of those fights where Basharat's doing his thing. Zahabi's, he's able to hang with him and whatnot, but it goes to 15 minutes. So give me Javid Basharat via decision. Maybe you want to target him if you can get a decent line on that for him to win via decision. I think this is a fight that you're really not betting on, if you ask me. Eryk, your boy Anders, taking on Jamie Pickett. How about Jamie Pickett? Still hanging around in the octagon. This should be the last time that we see him in there. Tough dude. A fighter, in my opinion, that really was never a UFC caliber fighter, but the ball kind of rolled his way a little bit with some opportunities, and good for him that he was able to say that he was a UFC fighter for some years. 13-10 as a pro. Eryk Anders 15-8 as a pro. Eryk Anders definitely towards the later half of his career, or maybe he's really coming to the end of the road here, just having a couple more fights. Just, I don't know, 36 years old. He's coming off quite a few amount of losses. He just lost to Marc-Andre Barriault, lost to Jun Young Park, Andre Muniz. In between that, though, he did sneak in a knockout over Kyle Dawkins. That was a fight I was there for it live. Bumped into him in the crowd after. If you guys remember, I interviewed him on MMA Live Discussion back in the day. Great dude, and he's a cool dude, man. And said what's up to him and whatnot. And I'll be rooting for him for sure here. And luckily for him, he really won't need my energy to get the job done, in my opinion. I think that Eryk Anders shows up motivated to get a W here after he really hasn't been having a great amount of success in the majority of his recent fights. And I think that he can go out there and do something similar to what he did to Dawkins. Jamie Pickett is a fighter that has been finished quite a bit. You take a look at his losses. Out of his 10 losses, he's been finishing half of them, okay? Half of them. And 2 of them, they're unknown types of defeats. So you know what that means. There was some funny business going on. I mean, there's some really low-level type stuff, and he probably got finished in those as well. But he's been a fighter that does get finished. I understand that he was finished against Bo Nichols, who's a very high-level fighter, but he was just knocked out by Dennis Teolinin, submitted by Kyle Dawkins, a fighter that Eryk Anders just smashed up, knocked out by Jordan Wright, if you remember that wild fight. So I don't have any faith that Jamie Pickett's going to survive this fight. Now, I will say this. If he does survive and he's able to hang around, the fight could potentially play out somewhat close. We've seen Eryk Anders at times, if he doesn't show up mentally, like in the Khalil Roundtree fight where he was just a walking punching bag. But when he shows up and he's motivated, he's a powerful dude, man, and his striking's underrated as well. He's a crisp fighter. He's a step ahead of Jamie Pickett here, and he's going to crack him. He's going to crack him with the shot. Eryk Anders opened up as a minus 300 favorite. He's now minus 375. Action coming his way. You take a look at the over-under on this fight, and the over 2.5 is set at minus 160. It opened up at minus 220. I was a little interested in that. I think that I would favor this fight ending maybe before the 2.5 mark. So some possible value there. You're getting dog odds next to it, plus odds. So I think that Eryk Anders is going to land some heavy shots in here, and I just don't trust Jamie Pickett. Jamie Pickett has a very long frame, and he could try to maybe jab and strike from the outside and try to hang around for a little bit. But if Anders shows up and he's serious, if he comes in here and looks to get him out of there, he could do it. Raul Rosas Jr. taking on Ricky Turcios. Of course, this fight was supposed to be taking place in the UFC Mexico card. I've talked about it quite a bit. For those of you guys that saw my YouTube short here, if you follow me on Instagram, you saw I talked a little bit more about this fight as well leading up to the UFC Mexico card. Not going to go too much in depth here. I am edging Ricky Turcios to get the job done here. I think if Raul Rosas Jr. struggles to get this fight down to the mat, and if he doesn't pull off that early sub, like he's an early finisher. That's what he's been doing. And if you saw in his last fight, he landed a big shot on the feet. Also, if he doesn't land a big shot and get that finish early on, I think that this is a fight that he can potentially struggle late in. Ricky Turcios is a true veteran of the game. And also, you take a look at the victories he just had. Terrence Mitchell, Jay Perrin, and Mando Gutierrez. He doesn't really have any respectable victories on his resume. So I just don't understand why he's coming in as high as a favorite as he did. Now, the line has really went the other way. People are definitely in agreement with me. We've seen steady action coming in on Turcios. Raul, 19 years old. He has a lot to learn. He'll come out fiery, and he will potentially get that finish. But if he doesn't, Ricky Turcios is a fighter that has that late round experience. We saw him thriving or really digging deep against Brady Haston late, where he won the Ultimate Fighter. We saw him go to a decision with Aiemann Zahabi, in a split decision loss there. He's a fighter I respect. Kevin Natividad is an underrated fighter. He has a decision victory over Daniel Argueta, who is an underrated fighter. He's a stud, and he's dug deep, man. He's fought grapplers like Argueta. Argueta is a serious wrestler. Ricky Turcios will have that volume edge, and I think his striking's better. So I like Ricky Turcios here, and Ricky Turcios right now is... here, we'll pull up the Turcios line. So he's right around a plus 195, but he opened up as like a plus 250 on some of these betting sites. So I still say the value's on Turcios, and I edge Turcios to avoid that sub. He has decent grappling as well. So I have him avoiding that sub and then just kind of picking Raul apart a little bit, or just getting the better of those striking exchanges in the second and third rounds. Give me Turcios to get the job done here. And also, do we not mention the fact that Raul Rosas Jr. just had Montezuma's revenge, and that is spelled Montezoomas, Montezuma's revenge. So a lot of people are giving me hate on IG about how I spelled it. That's how you spell it. You can Google it if you don't believe me. But Montezuma's revenge is no joke, and Raul should have been sticking to the bottled water, and unfortunately, he was glued to the toilet all Saturday there. So give me Turcios to win a decision. We got the prodigy, Umar Nurmagomedov, taking on the UFC newcomer, Bekzat Almakhan, who is a talented fighter. All right, guys, so if you didn't know that, he's a talented fighter. This is a decent fight here. All right, unfortunately, it's not the Corey Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov fight we were supposed to initially see, but props to Bekzat for stepping in here at just 26 years old, facing off against one of the top prospects the game has ever seen. And I know Umar is not a prospect right now, but still, I mean, he came in as really one of the better or best prospects we've ever seen. He's up there with Bo Nickel and whatnot. Now, we'll say this much. Could be a little bit of a stretch, and I don't expect the fight I don't know if it necessarily plays out like that, but this is a fight that kind of reminds me of when Arman Sarukian stepped in on short notice and took on Islam Makhachev, all right? And he actually performed pretty well. People didn't know anything about Arman at the time, and he showed that he is a fighter that was very talented. Almakhan has looked good. I watched tape on him, and he's a fighter that looks really good at just 26 years old. He's 17-1. He has one loss that came by way of sub, and that's something that I want to keep an eye on here because Umar Obviously, he's extremely well-rounded, has nasty kicks. Finally got a little knockout there in the octagon, knocked out Honi Barcelos. But his grappling is really high level. We've seen him submit Brian Kelleher and whatnot, but he's going to start to get more and more subs as his career goes on. And the newcomer was submitted back in 2020, but the dude that submitted him, even though there's no graphic for him here, he actually is he looks respectable. You take a look at his resume. He's a fellow Kazaki fighter, Sultan Sultan Zoldishbek Ulu. And it's interesting too. He spells his name. You can't tell here, but he spells his name Ulu. He spells it in lowercase. I guess that's a Kazakhstan thing. But comes in phenomenal shape. Does Bekzat. And I think that this fight could potentially play out closer than some people believe it to be. Umar opened up as a minus 850. Big action coming in him. He's now a minus 1100. I think that line's way too high. I get it. I don't need to go too much on about it. I mean, Umar's a stud. He's prepared for this date, and he's a fighter that could be wearing that gold in the near future here. But Bekzat is very well-rounded, and imagine this fight ended up playing out closely and he edged out a split decision, or imagine Bekzat goes in there and shows similarly to what Arman Sarukian did. Maybe he shows that he's extremely game and he's one of the top prospects that we need to keep an eye on. Not saying I expect that to play out like that, but what are you going to do? Throw an 1100, minus 1100 parlay together? No. You take a look at the over-under. They're favoring this fight to go towards a decision. So I kind of see that as well. I think Bekzat is going to be tough enough to hang around. I don't know if Umar really gets that sub on him. Maybe he does, but I think I'll aim Umar to get a decision, and I think that people will kind of take note of who Bekzat is, and we'll be excited to see who he faces off with next. In the flyweight division, we got my boy, Matt Schnell, taking on Steve Erceg. Steve Erceg, another fighter that has really just bursted onto the scene, right? You think about the fact that I believe he took a short notice fight, right, against David Dvorak. And it's kind of interesting, too, because he was supposed to be taking on, David Dvorak was supposed to be taking on Matt Schnell. So how funny is that, right? So Matt Schnell pulls out. He gives Steve Erceg this opportunity to burst onto the scene, and that's exactly what Steve Erceg does. He goes out there and he gets the victory over David Dvorak. He becomes a ranked fighter, goes out there, gets another victory over Alessandro Costa, the dangerous Costa. And Steve Erceg shows that he's one of the best flyweight fighters on planet Earth. It's pretty cool that works out. He's currently ranked the 12th. He's the 12th ranked flyweight fighter in the UFC right now. Matt Schnell still ranked 9th. Matt Schnell, a very well-rounded fighter, a very game fighter, a fighter that I have a great deal of respect for. He's a fighter that I interviewed on the show. It's so crazy. I found out that he went to the same middle school as me, a couple of years, maybe a year or two younger, which is kind of weird because it says he's 34 here. So I'm not really sure how that, maybe he was a year younger than me. He said he was 2 years. Maybe he got held back. Sorry about that, Schnell, if I'm calling you out on that. You know, maybe they held you back. You weren't playing with your Legos properly. Matt Schnell follows me on IG. He's always showing love. And this is, he sees my picks. And this is a tough one here, man. But I'll keep it real. I'm leaning towards Steve Erceg's way. I'm really liking what I've been seeing from Erceg. Erceg, not only is he a very under-the-radar grappler, I don't know if everyone understands that about it, but he has a high-level BJJ game. He's good, man. He really makes it work into the cage. Has a lot of early submissions, a lot of submissions early on in his career. Okay, 6 submissions out of his 11 victories. Now, we haven't seen that recently in the octagon, but I think with time that's going to come. The more he gets comfortable in there. One thing I've liked about him as well is that he's throwing nice calf kicks in there, and his jab is really looking good. His striking is coming around. He's a well-rounded fighter. And Matt Schnell at 34 years old, coming off some tough losses over the last couple of fights, right? He's been in some wars. Even when he defeated Sumadarji, man, he was covered in blood. He took some damage in that fight. Just was knocked out against Mateus Nicolau, submitted by Brandon Royval. It's just he was knocked out by Pantoja back in 2019. He's taken some damage, and I worry about him a little bit here in this spot because I think Steve Erceg is just going to be younger and fresher, and I think he's going to be pumping the jab, and I think we see some scrambles and whatnot. And I have a feeling that Erceg is going to get a finish in this fight. I think he's going to get his first sub in the octagon, his first finish in the octagon. So if Schnell's listening, my bad, brother. I hope you do good here. But I got to be honest. I think Erceg is one of the top young and up-and-comers in the division. I think he's going to work his way into the top 10. So we take a look at the betting line here. Steve Erceg is a hefty favorite. He's a minus 350 favorite. I'm not crazy about that per se. That's a high line, another high line in this card. I think you could argue there's value on Matt Schnell here. Matt Schnell has always shown that he's game. He's a very well-rounded fighter, has a nasty jab, very, very good boxing, good grappling. He does it all. So there's definitely potential that he exposes Erceg. Maybe Erceg is being overhyped a little bit, and Schnell can set that back. But I'm targeting Erceg more so getting a finish within the 15 minutes of this fight. We get the former title challenger, Alex Perez, who's still ranked number 7th in the division, been extremely inactive, but still ranked, taking out Mokaev. Mokaev, just 23 years old. I need to make sure I reiterate once again, this is a fighter that we're going to see his game excel so much throughout the next 5 years. He's such a young kid, and he already looks so good in his fights. I know he hasn't looked as good as some people have wanted him to continue to look early on in his UFC career, especially bursting onto the scene with that first round finish over Cody Durden. And I know some people haven't been that excited about his recent performances, even though, take a look, I mean, submissions against Jafael Filho and Tim Elliott in the 3rd round, submission against Malcolm Gordon, all in the 3rd round. And I think the reason why people haven't been as impressed from what they've seen from him is because early on in some of these fights, he's had some moments where he hasn't looked invincible. There's been some small struggles throughout those fights. And even the Charles Johnson fight, that was a fight that played out very closely, and he struggled to get takedowns. And I think people thought that he was going to be a fighter that just went out there and really performed every fight like he did against Cody Durden, just going out and completely just whooping dudes. And when you take a look at the betting lines that have been next to his name in some of those fights, that's another reason why people were expecting more out of him. But take a look, man. He's gotten those finishes in those fights. I know it played out a little bit longer and whatnot. I mean, he's a stud. He's a well-rounded fighter, and you could only expect him to look better and better every time we see him in there. So we're going to get to the betting line here in a second. But, Alex Perez is a fighter that he is a dangerous fighter. He has very, very heavy calf kicks, very heavy leg kicks. We've seen him stop fighters with the leg kicks back in the day. I know he had a child a couple years ago and took some time away from the game. That fight I'm talking about, too, was the Jussier Formiga fight. Stopped him with leg kicks. I believe that was the fight. Had a submission over Jordan Espinosa, a fighter that has disappeared from the UFC. Victory over Mark De La Rosa, the husband of you know what I'm talking about there, the husband of the very tough woman fighter, De La Rosa, who changed her name, came from the Ultimate Fighter. He was knocked out against Joseph Benavidez in the Davison Figueiredo fight. That was a fight he made an early mistake. He got a little bit overzealous, was submitted against Pantoja in his last fight. And you know what? I know it's all high-level losses or losses against high-level opponents, but I'm going to say he makes a mistake in this fight, and I think Mokaev finds a sub in this fight. How about that? I think that Mokaev gets another sub here. Now, is it an early or late sub? My gut actually tells me that Perez comes out looking to impose his will, and I think Mokaev maybe takes advantage of something and gets a finish early on in this fight. Maybe he also lands a big strike. Maybe he clips Perez with something. Perez has only been knocked out once out of his 7 losses. He's been pretty durable there, but Mokaev maybe throws some wild stuff, a flying knee. Maybe he follows it down and subs him. But Mokaev, I think he's going to get a sub within these 15 minutes. I don't say it with an overwhelming amount of confidence, but overall, I like Mokaev. I like Mokaev to win this fight. And interestingly enough, also, Mokaev, you can catch him right around a minus 300 betting line right now. He opened up as a minus 350 in my bookie. He's a minus 300. That's not a typical line that we've seen next to Mokaev's name. And this is the, have I been saying in fact a lot? I'll tone that down. But this is a fight where we are looking at Mokaev as the smallest favorite that he's been in the octagon. Usually he's a much bigger favorite. We've seen him very, very high up on the lines. And now he's a minus 300. So if you want to mix him in a 2-team parlay, or like I like to do, I like my 2-teamers, but some of you guys are degenerates and you go for your 5-teamers. You're throwing him in there. That's what I'm seeing. And I'm not really liking that underdog value on Perez. I would have liked him to been like a minus 350 if I was targeting him, or a minus 400 if I really wanted value. I was hoping that Mokaev was going to be absolutely steamed like he always is. But I will say this line has to have you scratching your head. All right. This line, there's a reason why this line is like that. And that is just that Mokaev has had his struggles in the cage. Perez is a more mature fighter, and he's a good fighter. He's a talented fighter. And maybe Perez shows up and this fight plays out very closely and you're getting that dog value. I think that's what some people are seeing, and I think that's why you see the line like that. But give me Muhammad Mokaev to get a sub. Now, as we kick this card off, I mentioned some of the young upcoming stars that were scattered throughout this card early on. And I think I kind of glossed over Vitor Petrino, if I remember correctly. Let me say, Vitor Petrino at 26 years old, he is definitely one of the top upcoming stars in the game in the light heavyweight division. He's fighting. He's taking on Tyson Pedro here. Tyson Pedro is a good fighter. He's been a little inactive throughout the years. He's had his moments. He came back. He made a return, had a big-time knockout. That was the... excuse me here. That was where he came back and had a knockout over Isaac Villanueva, a very low-level fighter. Backed that up with another first-round knockout over Harry Hunsucker, a.k.a. Harry Honeysuckle, low-level fighter. Then he lost a decision to Modestas Bukauskas, where he had some moments in that fight, but he was a step behind Modestas. And then he just went out there and knocked out Anton Turcios, which that was a big victory for him there. They were talking a little bit of smack at the press conference and whatnot. Anton, the pleasure man, he got shut down. So, yes, Tyson Pedro is a dangerous fighter. He's a decently well-rounded fighter. He's a little stiff with his striking for my liking. I think that Vitor Petrino is a much more explosive athlete that has even greater power than Pedro does. And Pedro has good power, but I mean, this dude Petrino has dynamite in his hands. And the way I'm seeing this fight go down is I'm seeing these two guys clashing, and I'm seeing Vitor Petrino getting another knockout here. He's had 7 knockouts out of his 10 victories. He just had a knockout over Modestas Bukauskas. You do some MMA math there. Bukauskas with that recent victory over Pedro. He submitted Marcin Prachnio. Prachnio has been looking really good as of recently, which is, kind of had a lot of us scratching our heads, man. You got to respect Prachnio at this time now. He's doing his thing. Had that decision victory over Anton Turcios as well, a common opponent. A victory over Antigulov early on as well over at UAE Warriors, recognizable fighter there. Petrino's young. He's promising. He's explosive. He's the better athlete here. He's going to be quicker and a little bit more fluid. I think his defense will be a little bit sharper. I think Pedro looks to land some big shots too, and there's potential he could land one, obviously, as two big guys are trading. But I think that Petrino will be more smooth with his defense and his head movement and will just slip out of range and will capitalize, as I've seen Pedro leave his head on the center line quite a bit in some of his fights. Don't forget, he got knocked out by Shogun Rua, an aged Shogun Rua. He was knocked out in that fight. He was submitted by OSP, an aged OSP. I mean, so he's had some questionable performance throughout the years. He's had some moments as well, but I definitely like Petrino here. I think Petrino's a stud. And let's go take a look at the betting line here, as Petrino's at minus 325, another high favorite on the card here. I mean, yeah, give me the value on that 325 line. It's tough to say, right? I mean, it's tough, man, when you're working with these high lines. We got a couple different type of prop bets available now for this fight. So the over-under at 1.5, though, it's pretty much set even. I would aim more towards the under. I think that these guys are going to clash, and I think that it opened up at minus 150, so action has been going the other way, and I'm still liking the under here. I think that we're going to see a knockout in this fight, and also Petrino wins inside the distance is set at minus 145. I mean, you're probably better off targeting that than taking him on the money line, I would say. I think he gets a finish here, but if it does go to decision, he's still going to be a step ahead. So you got to be careful. You're not handcuffing yourself with bets you could just capitalize on. Maybe you take a safer route. I like Vitor Petrino to get a finish inside the distance in this fight. Hey guys, real quick, if you're looking to sign up to a new sports book, reach out to me. I highly recommend Bovada.lv. I will give you my referral link. If you sign up through my referral link, you're going to get an added bonus to your account. Not only that, I'm going to give you an entire month for my official plays. You get a 1-month package for free. If you have any questions about the site, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And also, if you're just looking to work with me for my official plays, just reach out to me. I'll give you my pricing on that as well. I would love to work with you guys who've been killing it recently, so do not hesitate. So here it is, boys. We got the headliner, Jairzinho Rozenstruik, ranked number 12th in the heavyweight division. Shamil taking on Shamil Gaziev. Gaziev looking to get a number next to his name. If he gets a dominant victory here, I think that's very likely. Shamil Gaziev looked really, really good in that UFC debut against Martin Buday. Also had a submission over Greg Velasco, and I mentioned I actually think Greg Velasco is a fighter you got to keep an eye on. I think that he's a little bit more dangerous than some people believe. Also had a victory over Darko Stosic. Had a knockout victory. That's a recognizable victory that he had before going on to Dana White's Contender Series. Shamil Gaziev is a massive heavyweight. He's a huge dude. He's well-rounded as well, right? We've seen him come in and use his striking, but he also has the grappling in his back pocket. That's going to be key in this matchup. We've seen Jairzinho Rozenstruik struggle very much so against grapplers, right? We've seen him flatten his back and just have, really, have you seen him really struggling in the cage? We know that if Rozenstruik can land a big shot, I mean, he could put anybody out. One of the most phenomenal heavyweight strikers that we've ever seen in the sport. All right. I mean, I'll give him that type of respect. And I think that there's a realistic possibility that he can get a knockout in this fight. But all in all, I think that the grappling is going to be a little bit too much from Shamil Gaziev. Now, if Gaziev gets reckless and tries to use his own striking, he can get clipped. But I think that if he fights an intelligent fight, closes the distance, starts to hang on Rozenstruik, we've seen Rozenstruik not have the best cardio as well in certain fights. And even if Gaziev is breathing a little heavy, I mean, Rozenstruik will be right there with him, breathing heavy. And I think that what I'm kind of seeing Gaziev like in full mount. I'm seeing him get on top of Rozenstruik and like flatten him out and get on top of him. And I'm seeing him set up a finish here. I like Gaziev to get a finish in this fight. I just don't think that Rozenstruik's going to be able to hang around for 25 minutes. Now, if he's able to survive the early onslaught, maybe they're breathing heavily and it's just kind of a sloppy fight that goes into the later rounds and it's a decision victory for Shamil. That's a possibility too. But I think Jairzinho will lose a lot of pop on his strikes. I don't see that knockout coming. Maybe Shamil's breathing heavily though too and can't get him out of there. But I favor Shamil getting on top of him and the ref having to step in due to the strikes just being kind of rained down on Rozenstruik. That's what I'm seeing in the main event matchup here. So Shamil is the favorite. He's a -160 favorite here. Some people may have some question marks about him. They want to see more from him. He opened up as a -190. Action going the other way. He's now -160. So action coming in on Jair here. I understand to an extent. Jair's been around the block, but you got to worry that Jair can't keep this fight standing and he struggles. Now, the over 1.5, it's actually set at 210. So people are really not even believing this fight goes over a round and a half. And I'm kind of in agreement. I think Shamil gets on top of him, and I think we see that early stoppage. I think that in one way or another too, right? Maybe Rozenstruik clips him as well, but I'm liking the under in this fight. That's kind of how I would go. I mean, you're paying -210. I'm not saying that I'm crazy about taking a -210 line on that. I'm not saying there's value there, but I mean that's the route I'm going with this fight. Gaziev to win inside the distance is set at -125. So your line dips. You get a little bit of a better line there. If it goes to a decision, you handcuffed yourself once again. So you gotta be careful how you're doing that. But I like Gaziev to get a TKO stoppage in the main event. He becomes a ranked heavyweight fighter, and we'll be talking about him for some time to come. He is a Dagestani fighter who is, he's been fighting out of Bahrain, right, representing Bahrain, and he's been getting in some good training. He's trained with some legitimate fighters. He surrounds himself with some real dudes, so he knows he knows what it's like to be in there with high level fighters, right? And this isn't nothing new to him. Jairzinho, Rozenstruik is not going to intimidate him, in my opinion. So give me Shamil Gaziev to get that TKO finish in the main event. A quick one, a quick and to the point video. Hopefully you guys liked it. Please like it. Really, if you could hit that like button, that does help me a lot. And I think that we did good with this video here. I think we really kind of got a gist of what we're looking at for this event. Not the biggest of cards, but we'll enjoy it. Let's make some money on it. And you guys know we got some big events coming up in the near future. You guys can continuously expect to see me putting out all types of new content coming your way. So hopefully you guys are focusing on the channel. And remember, those free bets come out occasionally as well. So maybe you want to hit like that notification bell. So whenever I put out a video, it lets you know, because those will be coming out periodically. You already know we had an underdog play for our first free play that we gave out in quite a while there on that Ilya Taporia. So I'll leave you guys with some quick parting words. I'll just give you guys a good one, a steady one that you guys will always see here at the channel throughout some of these videos. Just if you're not feeling good, make sure you're listening to your body. Make sure you're paying attention to what you're putting in your body. A lot of us grew up not really thinking about stuff like that, right? We see how the world's changing, and it seems so obvious nowadays, but in the old days, people didn't notice, and a lot of people are still living that kind of life where you're putting all these poisons in your body. Check your ingredients label or your nutritional facts on what you're eating, and check out what you're putting in your body. And if you're not feeling good, that could have something to do with it, as well as make sure you're getting outside and getting that sun on your skin. Don't just sit inside all day, man. You got to get out, get that sun on your skin. That will make you feel much better. Get a little active, move around a little bit. Your body needs that, man. If you're not giving that to your body, don't be scratching your head while you don't feel good. All right, guys, I'm going to be upfront with you right now. I'm going to be straight up with you. Don't scratch your head and wonder why you don't feel good and feel like you're cursed or this and that. Get out the house and just stick to it and keep moving around and keep doing things and get out of your shell, and you're gonna feel better. All right, I know it's easier said than done, but we'll talk more about different ways we can get out of your shell, but start with at least knowing that that's an issue for some of you guys, and moving forward with that first and foremost, and then we'll get there. All right, we'll talk more about that. All right, guys, on that note, we will sign out. Signing out. Teller.
Welcome to the show. This the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.